Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Truthear Pure. This is the follow-up to the Hexa, which was one of my favorite IEMs at its asking price. What? The Pure comes in right at around $90, which is, I believe, at around the same price as what the Hexa is now. And in this video, we're going to find out if the Pure is a worthy successor to the Hexa, whether or not it's any good, and if this is my new favorite at its asking price. And actually, make sure you stick around to the end of the video because I will be talking to the person involved in the tuning choices that were made going from the Hexa to the Pure. So stick around for that. Okay, let's get going with the video. All right, just a quick disclaimer. This was sent to me by Shenzhen Audio for review. Big thanks to Shenzhen for sending it in. Of course, they haven't paid me to say anything particular about it, and all thoughts and opinions here are my own. All right, so to start off with, this is the box for the Pure, and as you can see, they've stuck with the cartoon child aesthetic. Always nice to see the cartoon children are out in full force. Many of them, I'm sure, will be in the comments complaining about the fact that I said cartoon children. Oh my god, the horror. All right, so inside the box, you of course get this baggie here. It's a no-nonsense kind of baggie. This is just sort of like a crumpling up style of baggie, but it actually does work reasonably well. Just don't put it in something where the IEM could get crushed because there really is no protection here whatsoever. That's fine in my opinion, but just keep that in mind. You also get two different sets of tips. I'm using the black tips here, which are narrow bore, but then you also get some wider bore gray tips right here. And they do have an effect on the sound. And then you also get some foam tips, but nobody uses those, so those can go straight to the bin. I mean, it's fine if you use foam tips. Don't let anybody bully you if you use foam tips. All right, so let's talk about the shell ergonomics, the design, and all that good stuff. It's very similar to the original Hexa, nearly identical. They've made some changes to the faceplate. It's more of like a serrated looking faceplate to it. I actually prefer the way the original looks personally, but you know, it's fine. The inside of it as well is pretty similar with this sort of translucent inner shell piece. And the nozzle is also pretty similar for its overall size. If you had issues with the fit of the previous one, you'll have issues with this one, but if you didn't have issues with it, you won't have issues with this one either. And I personally find the Pure and the Hexa to be both very comfortable for long listening sessions. The cable doesn't feel stiff or anything like that. And so no issues with the cable personally. And the ear hooks are reasonably flexible. Sometimes IEMs have really stiff ear hooks and that can also dig in an uncomfortable way, but for these, it's no problem whatsoever. 2-pin style connector for the cable. And then the cable itself is quite no nonsense. No extra terminations or anything like that on the end. It's fine for this price. Remember, this is a more budget IEM. But that's basically it. I just have to say that I do appreciate the more understated looking shells. I generally don't like shells that are super flashy and blingy. And so Truthear coming out with products like the Hexa and now the Pure, this speaks to me. I mean, this is my kind of product. My only complaint about the visual design elements that they go for here is that they put Truthear on one of the shells right here. And I just wish that they had left that blank. Like, I don't want to walk around with somebody thinking, oh, he's got Truthear going on. Oh, he's listening to the truth. For the most part, it's fine, and I do really like the rest of the aesthetic vibe that it's going for. Now, let's talk about the sound quality. So, for folks who are not familiar with the original Hexa, that was a really great sounding IEM because it was mostly neutral, just with maybe a hint of glare or, you know, forwardness in the treble in certain places. For me, it could occasionally be a bit on the edgy side in the lower treble, but it was generally well received for being neutral across the board. It still had, you know, decent bass presence, and it was also, you know, very detailed, very clear sounding overall. And the Pure is mostly the same, just with a couple of key differences, particularly for some of the areas that I personally found to be problematic. And that's what I'm most happy about with this. But that doesn't mean that it didn't come with trade-offs. There are some, and so I'm going to dive into the data now and explain some of this to you guys as well. But I also want to let you guys know, the way I hear this product is not how it measures, and how you are going to hear this product is going to also be influenced by the general shape and depth of your ear canal. So this might get technical. So what I'm showing you guys here is the HPTF variation for an IEM, and you might not be used to reading IEM measurement data like this. So what I've done here is measured at multiple different insertion depths to give you a better picture of the range of possible experience that you might get with this product. As soon as you get up into the treble at around 6 kilohertz, 7 kilohertz, things start to widen, and that's because of the behavior of this series or pattern of resonances that is the result of the distance between the driver and your eardrum. And so if the IEM is sitting further out of your ear, that's going to sound different from if it's further into your ear, or if you have larger ear canals versus smaller ear canals. That air volume in between the driver and your eardrum is going to impact how you hear this range. And so for me, it actually sounds a little bit different from how this center line graphs. But again, the important thing here to understand is why it makes sense to show the HPTF visualization for this, for IEMs as well as over-ear headphone data. We've been doing this for over-ear headphones for a while, and now we want to roll it out for IEMs as well. Briefly, let me just show you guys the difference between the narrow bore tips of the darker ones and the lighter gray ones. So this is the black tips, the narrow bore tips. Now let's look at the gray tips. And it's mostly similar, just with some key differences throughout the treble. And I can tell you that for me, the gray tips, so the wider bore tips, just don't work at all. It causes the sound to be a little bit more grating, a little bit more harsh. But the narrow bore tips sound very, very good to me. So let's just assume that we're running with these tips that I have on here right now. The Pure is, as you can see, a mostly neutral IEM, very neutral. But with that said, there are a couple of features here to talk about. One is that there is a bit of bloom or forwardness in the low, mid, upper bass section. So overall, the mids sound mostly really good, really natural. It doesn't sound like, honky or harsh or grating or anything like that. And I think actually the original Hexa, it did come across occasionally as a little bit on the lean or shouty side of things. They're a little bit glary, to do with a balance between the upper mids and lower mids. Now with the Pure, you have a lot more of a forward character to that low mid section, causing a bit of bloom or cloudiness to the mids, which it does make things sound a bit more full and rich, but at the same time, it does detract a little bit from that clarity for certain types of music. So again, if I'm thinking about my piano, jazz, that kind of thing, I actually think this is where the original Hexa did a little bit better. It was a little bit more detailed sounding. But this one also doesn't have any of that leanness problem. So in that respect, it's a bit of an improvement. And because of where this feature is relative to the bass, I find at least that the bass, when I'm listening to things that have a ton of bass, that bass comes across with a lot better sense of dynamism and impact and physicality. It's sort of an extra sense of hardness to the bass, which I think is in part because of this more forward character to that sort of, upper bass, low mid bloom section. I'm not going to say that this is how I prefer it to be. I would have preferred a little bit less at around 200 hertz or 300 hertz, wherever this is. But there are definitely moments with this IEM where things can hit very hard. Now, here's the other side of this. Because there is less treble overall on the Pure compared to the original Hexa, I feel that also does make some of that bloom come forward a little bit more, or I guess the overall balance shifts a little bit more towards the lower frequencies, which I think is a good thing. So this does fix that issue that I had with the original Hexa being a little bit too glary occasionally with some of that more forward presence in the low and mid treble. With that said though, the one thing that this doesn't quite fix for me is the length mode resonance issue that I personally deal with. I get a resonance between 6 and 7 kilohertz. So it's actually closer to like 6.8K for me with this IEM, with the Pure. I also get kind of a weird forward character at around 4.2 kilohertz, which does not show up on the graph really at all. So that could be just a unique thing to my ear. But the other side of this is that because there is less treble overall, that reveals things about the lower treble and the mid-range more. But okay, let's now do a quick comparison with the original Hexa. Let me just... So here you can see the general differences that I've been talking about. The Pure has more low, mid, and upper bass energy, and it has less treble generally. And again, for me, I would get these sort of length mode issues on both of them, but I still get it on the Pure, right? So this doesn't sound perfectly smooth to me in the treble. There's a bit of hardness there still with the Pure. And actually, this is why I kind of don't hear this product as being as warm as it might measure. Because for me, it's almost like, at around like 6 to 7 kilohertz, there's kind of like a bump up there. But if you have a differently shaped ear canal, which you probably do, I mean, it'd be weird if you had the same shape to the ear canal, you're likely not going to hear it quite like that. And so for you, it might actually come across as warmer and smoother. Now, I've been thinking about how to like reference this to over-ear headphones that people might be familiar with. And I was originally thinking this is kind of like the difference between an HD600 and an HD650. But I actually don't think that description makes sense for how I hear it. The Pure, at least subjectively, is a bit more like an HD550, just with the kind of forward low, mid, upper bass bloom that you get from an HD650. I would actually say that it is more generally neutral. It doesn't have quite that same richness and sweetness that you get from the 650 and the 600s. In my mind, the deciding factor between these two IEMs, between the Hexa and the Pure, it should probably be based around that low mid feature. If you're looking for something that is more analytic and more, I guess, clarity focused, the original Hexa I think is the better choice. But if you're looking for something that is a little bit more relaxed, less analytical, more smooth in the treble, again depending on your ear canal, that's just sort of an asterisk for any IEM, then the Pure would be the way to go. And for me personally, that's the reason why I actually prefer the Pure over the original Hexa. The things that stand out to me on the original Hexa, despite the fact that I love that IEM, when it is that more glaring and biting kind of thing, that is a more bothersome feature than the more forward character of the low, mid, upper bass, emphasis that I get with the Pure. With that in mind, like if you compare these to like IEMs that cost way more, like hundreds of dollars, even in the $1,000 price range, they are more neutral. Like these are both more like typically neutral, balanced sound signatures than what you're going to get with the vast majority of products that are out there. And if you're new to IEMs and if you're just considering getting into this at all, you really cannot go wrong with either of these IEMs. So I guess for anybody who is looking for, the HD6XX of IEMs, this is probably the closest that I can think of right now to that kind of sound signature, even though there are some differences as well. So that is going to do it for the review portion of this video. Obviously, yes, I recommend it, but I think it just matters, what kind of sound signature you're going for between the Pure and the Hexa. But now let's talk to the person who was involved in the tuning choices to do with this product. But just before getting into that, I want to remind folks that these videos are made possible by Headphones.com. Headphones.com is not just another audio store. They've empowered reviewers such as us here on this channel to do all kinds of technical deep dives, and their support has given us the tools and resources to understand sound quality better than ever before. If you find any of the information we provide here on this channel useful or interesting, consider joining our community and checking out Headphones.com the next time you're shopping for some new audio gear. Okay, back to the video. All right, so I am here with Listener, who was involved in the tuning process for the Truthear Pure. Listener, what do you have to say for yourself?
Starting right out of the gate with an accusatory tone. I love it. Yeah, so I mean, just the quick cliff notes for it. Yes, I was involved in the tuning of the Truthear Pure. There was no prototyping phase of it, so they never sent me any prototypes for me to like sign off on or give feedback about. I had no involvement with the visual design, accessories, any of that stuff.
Oh, so the cartoon child was not your choice?
It was not my choice. I will say this one is probably my favorite of the art from Truthear's releases up to this point. Okay. But yeah, please cut that out in the edit.
No, that's going in. Griffin is a weeb, confirmed.
But the last and most important thing, I think, is that I'm not making any money on this. This is not something that I did for profit. I just kind of slid into the Truthear engineers' DMs and wanted to talk about tuning IEMs, and it just so happened that I did so at what ended up being the right time.
Yeah, so this is not a collab. This is just...
No, this is not a listener collab. You're not going to see my name or anything about me on the box. You're not going to see anything about Headphones.com on the box. I was not a full-time employee when I did this, so this was not like a Headphones.com co-branded effort or anything like that. It was just me helping out a brand that I believe in.
What did you have in mind when you were, I guess, expressing, your desires for an IEM? Like, you obviously were very familiar with the Hexa. When you approached Truthear about this, what was kind of the pitch?
Yeah, so this was right after my article, The Shape of IEMs to Come, had come out. And I basically just hit up their engineer and was like, the 5128 gives us some information about what maybe a route we can take to make IEMs sound a little bit closer to headphones and a little bit less shouty, nasally, small sounding. And he and I got talking about kind of IEMs that we liked. For me, my inspirations, as far as the IEM sphere would go, was like the AudioSense DT200 and the Let's Short Cadenza 12, both of which were featured in that article. But honestly, my main inspiration was the HD650. Like, I wanted something that was like warm, reasonably well-rounded, and accessible, because I felt like that was something that was really lacking in the under $100 sphere. And it seems like the Pure is that. I mean, I don't know where you ended up landing on it, because I haven't watched this review yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly the comparisons to the HD650 makes sense. There's a lot of similarity or familiarity there, but I also think that, I was originally struggling with what to compare this to, because I do think the 650 is also different in the upper frequencies, but I can absolutely
definitely
see where I can see where I guess that comparison makes sense. When you were the process for this, was it kind of like to tell the folks at Truthear, hey, like, make this adjustment here, or like, what, I guess what's the, like, do you have to let them know, hey, change this crossover, change this driver, or like what's actually involved in like the advice giving process?
Yeah, sure. So I had kind of reached out to the engineer and given him my whole spiel. And he hit me back and he was like, hey, thanks for all this information. This is really interesting. It's going to take a little time to digest. Once he had digested it, he let me in on the fact he was actually already working on the follow-up to the Hexa, and it looked quite a bit different than what we got. It kind of went the opposite direction that the Pure went. So instead of warmer mids, it was colder in the mids, and there was more treble, and there was a more distinct bass shelf. After a while of talking, we had kind of agreed that was territory that was already tread by the Zero Red. So I kind of maybe convinced him a little bit to double down on the Hexa and what I think made the Hexa special, which was that it was, more of a neutral kind of thing. It wasn't so much about bass and contrast and all that. It was more about just like reasonable tuning. And most of my iterative tweaking was just kind of getting the mid-range balance to where we both were happy. And I think where I maybe flexed a little bit more of my judgment was on the treble and making sure it was relaxed enough that it kind of fit within the HRTF expectation that the 5128 and population average HRTFs tells us might be a good thing to aim for, but also that it would be something that works with a variety of tips. So something I really kind of don't love about the modern IEM sphere is that because IEMs are so bright, you basically get locked into a single tip type. And for me, it's usually narrow bore tips because they roll off upper treble. But for the Pure, I found most tips sounded pretty good. But there was one tip that I think sounded best, and it ended up being the stock wide bore tip for me.
Interesting. So you prefer the wide bore tips?
I do. I like the fact that it dips a little bit in that 9 kilohertz to 10 kilohertz area, that it doesn't sound dipped in my ear at all. I think for people who want more of like a linear kind of transfer between the low treble and the upper treble, like a smoother mid treble transition, the narrow bore tips are going to be better. But for me, I don't know if it's my HRTF or whatever's going on in my ear canal, but I do like that little dip in the mid treble that happens with the wide bore tips. So that was kind of my plan, I guess, was making sure that the treble ended up firmly within the realm of reasonable, or what I would call reasonable at least.
Now, if you had to sum up sort of your sense of the difference between the Hexa and the Pure, how would you kind of characterize that?
So I think the main difference is, the mids and treble, because actually the sub bass amount is basically identical. Something that I had lamented about the Hexa was that, it often got complaints about the bass quality not being great, and to my perception, it was because there was too much sub bass kind of overwhelming the mid and upper bass. So I wanted to kind of fill in that upper bass region to kind of bring forth some of the early overtones of bass guitars, bass synths, stuff like that. And I think we did that. It also ended up making the mid-range a little bit more headphone-like, I guess I'll say. As far as the difference between the Pure and the Hexa, I would say the Hexa is kind of like an HD 560S where it's got, full bass extension, but it doesn't really feel impactful or full or warm in any sense of the word. It's a fairly lean listen despite still having a fairly prominent sub bass. And the treble is just a little bit too spicy for me. I mean, that's true for a lot of IEMs for me, but was certainly also true of the Hexa and kind of stopped me being able to hear it as neutral as a lot of other people heard it. The Pure, I feel like, is more in kind of the HD 650, maybe even like Worn Pads HD 650 conversation, where it's just, it's a very kind of euphonic, warm type of signature. I mean, it's definitely got a little bit too much of that kind of halo around like male vocals, and it's got like a glow to it that the 650 also has. It's a little bit too warm for me in the mids, but I would say that's kind of where I would choose to compare them. Like Pure is like a little bit on the warm side of neutral, but the Hexa is a little bit too lean. I wouldn't say either of them is perfect, but I would say they're both within the camp of neutral, such that they both make sense to be called a neutral IEM, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's actually how I characterized it just before we jumped on this call. So
okay, good.
Yeah, so that aligns. Great. Well, thanks for your explanation for the things that you have done. And so for folks who, want all the treble in the world, you can blame listener for the Pure's existence. No.
Yeah, I mean, if you want more treble, you have every other IEM out there to choose from. Yeah, frankly,
that's fair. That's true.
This was really just to fill a hole in the market, and there's really nothing else that's tuned like it. So I think Truthear was really brave to take this risk and double down on the kind of neutral for neutral's sake that the Hexa represented, and now the Pure kind of represents.
I like it. I mean, it solves the ouchie zones for me for the most part, which is
I think
an improvement.
I feel like an IEM for you is going to need to be drastically different than an IEM for me. I think you really just need a lot less low treble than I'm going to need, just because of your anatomy.
Yeah, if folks want to learn more generally, join our Discord and you can chat with listener or myself there. But otherwise, that's going to do it for this video. Thanks to everybody for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.
Thanks, guys. Bye.